So, Sanjay, we're a family company, been around for 42 years. Josh and I are brothers, if you didn't gather that from the last name. And our father started as an IBM reseller. And then over the last 7, 8 years, we've pivoted to cybersecurity. And we have 112 employees. And we just started this podcast so that we could meet cool people like you. And when we were researching you, we thought we are super excited to have you join us. So that's
Wonderful.
all you need to know about Valcom is
Great.
and we are really excited to have you join
Where are
us.
you
So I'm
guys
Mike.
based?
We are based out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'm the CEO of Valcom.
And I'm the CIO of Alcom. So I'm on the engineering side, and Mike is on the, well, I guess grew up in the sales side here at Valcom. And so we work together pretty closely.
And
That's
where are
great.
you from? Where are you based out of?
I'm here in our Santa Clara office. I'm living in Los Altos, been in California since 91. Um, but came here after 4 years in college in the East Coast, and I grew up in India. Came as an immigrant to um, college on a scholarship in the late 80s, and then came out of Silicon Valley, and somehow I haven't left this area.
Yeah, you have an impressive background. We wanted you to tell us about yourself and those things, how you got there, how you landed Cohesity and your journey there. Mostly about you and how you got there.
I grew up in India in a, I would say, middle class or lower middle class. So poor by all American standards, but middle or lower middle class in India. My dad was a naval officer who left the Navy to um, plant churches. So he's a sort of a preacher, teacher of a church. And my mom's a doctor who also kind of left her medical profession to serve in leprosy mission hospitals. So I come from a family that's very service oriented in terms of all they've done to try and help humanity and help, and I'm the oldest of four boys. Um, I was fairly good at engineering, sorry, math and sort of engineering related things. And in India, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, you kind of became a doctor or an engineer. I joke about it. Typically, those are the paths out of poverty or out of it was you got a good education, you became a doctor and engineer. So I had sort of that math gene in my body much more so than my biology side from my mom, and I wanted to be an engineer. And uh, my path was likely to go. I applied for this engineering program in India. The equivalent of MIT in India is called IIT, Institute of Technology, the prestigious engineering school, and I'd gotten in there. But at the same time, my uncle who lived in the United States at the time had said there were a few colleges who were offering scholarships to international students, and I decided to apply to MIT. I didn't get into MIT, but I got into this college called Dartmouth that has a very good computer science program in New Hampshire. I'd never been to New Hampshire, really never knew what the United States was like. But when I got a scholarship and it was computer science, which I really wanted to study, and Dartmouth had a pretty famous computer science program because there's a gentleman there named John Kemeny who invented True Basic, the basic language. He was a very, very well-known name in computing. I took the leap and came here, in 87. And, it was a culture shock, complete culture shock. Imagine an 18-year-old who had been sheltered in Bangalore, India, coming to a country that was very different. The culture is different, the people are different. But Dartmouth itself, if you've seen the movie Animal House, that movie is about Dartmouth.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's just like an absolute culture shock on all fronts. Now, fortunately, because the British had set up a lot of schools in India that were based in English. I spoke the language. I spoke English reasonably well, and I was reasonably well prepared academically for the American college system. But it was a very tough first year. I was homesick. I was fish out of water. It was extremely cold. I mean, New England gets very, very cold compared to Bangalore. So on all fronts, it was a rude awakening. But I adjusted. by the end of my 4 years, I'd wanted to work in some tech company, and I was very fortunate and blessed to get an offer to work at Apple. I'd always considered the Macintosh like one of my favorite computers, and I was enamored by Steve Jobs. Now, unfortunately, Steve Jobs had been fired from Apple in the early 90s. So when I joined Apple, he wasn't there. But I always joke for the 4 years I was at Apple, his ghost could have been there because
Oh,
everything about Apple was Steve Jobs did this, Steve Jobs did that. This is how Steve would say things. And I never met the man, but I was just like so enamored by everything about design and all the beautiful things. But those were the wilderness years of Apple because they were really kind of wandering around without, they were sort of trying to chase Microsoft. It wasn't happening, and
yeah.
Steve wasn't there. And in 95, or later, I think 96, he came back. But by 95, I'd gotten pretty disillusioned with the 4 years I'd been working at Apple. Apple was trying to build an operating system that competed with NT. I was working on that effort. It was a joint venture with IBM, and it was going nowhere. So I decided, I was probably, I think, about 26 at the time, to go back to school and get an MBA. So I went back to the East Coast to get an MBA at Harvard. And that's where I think my eyes opened a little bit more to not just the science of engineering, but product management, marketing, other things around tech, and general management principles. How do you run companies? What makes successful companies? And all of a sudden, I think I was starting to think about businesses not just as an engineer writing code, but as a possible business unit leader, or how would you build a business? Now, I had no aspirations to be a CEO. I just wanted to learn more about business and apply the technical knowledge to products and to business concepts. So I came back and did a number of things at two or three companies, but probably the most formative one was, you know, Informatica, which recently
Oh,
got bought by Salesforce. But after my first job out of business school, my second job was at Informatica, and a tremendous amount of learning experience. It was probably my first break that I got in Informatica to a more senior position in the company. I first ran marketing for the company, and then later on ran a business unit, and learned a ton there. The company grew, I think, from about 60, 70 million to about 250 million when I was there. And then I left. And probably then after that, I think that launched me into a place where I now was ready to take on more responsibility. In the next 20 years, was spent mostly between two companies, SAP and VMware. We can talk about any of that as you want. And I basically was very fortunate to build some very important businesses, the analytics business,
mm,
and the database businesses, and several of the infrastructure businesses at SAP, where I was there for 8 years, ended that time as president of the company. And then at VMware, where I was, built the security businesses, the end user computing businesses, and ended my time there as COO of the company. But both were fantastic learning experiences. We took the company from 10 to 20 billion at SAP, and then from about 6 to 12 billion at VMware. And kind of those 16 years between those two companies taught me a lot about a global business. How do you build a great brand that's international at SAP? How do you take a company and scale it? Um, Taught a lot about leadership. We can cover any of that you want. I left VMware in 2021 and took a
Side
year
note,
off.
we loved when you were at VMware. We love VMware from when you were there to that's all I have to say. Continue.
Yeah, it was a great. It is still a great. I mean, it's a different
thanks
company now.
thanks for building a great company that
It
we
wasn't
loved
just
working
me.
with.
Yeah, it wasn't just me, Pat, Raghu, myself, many others. We really loved that company. There's a lot of sort of fanaticism about the company,
yeah.
and then many of those people have now joined me here, like Michael and others. So anyway, um, I took a year off. I joined two boards. One is this medtech giant, Philips in Netherlands. I'd really, enjoy healthcare because my mom's a doctor and I respect that industry. And then the other is Sneak, a developer security company. And then
Right.
Cohesity came calling me. I think it was around March or April of 2022. The founder, I'd heard a lot about him. Oh, he's an incredibly smart man who built the world's first zero trust hyper-converged security platform for data. And they tried to take the company public, but then the market collapsed in early 22, so they pulled the IPO, decided to wait. And I liked the company, I liked the vision, I really respected Mohit a lot. And I joined in August 2022, and next week's my 3-year anniversary.
Congrats. That is as
It's
awesome.
amazing.
You talked about culture at VMware. What was your takeaway as far as leadership at a company like that?
We had these values called Epic 2. I mean, we have kind of similar sort of scheme here called radio. I thought the acronym was very good. It was execution, passion, integrity, customer, and community. Epic squared or whatever have you. And Pat, myself, others, we wanted to be an epic company, and those epic values really encompassed a lot of our culture. But at the center of that was that I word, integrity. We have a similar, not the exact same terms, but we call our culture and values here radio, which stands for respect, having authenticity, having, delivery mindset, integrity, and obsession with customers. That's the RADIO. So I think whatever acronym you use for to describe your culture and your values, I tell people the more important aspect of it is, do you live by those values? I often put a mission statement or the value statement of a famous company up in front of people, and I ask them, could you guess which company it is? And they all think, oh, it's a Disney, it's an Apple. It's a very glamorous set of values that this particular company had for themselves. Turned out that company was Enron. So, they had incredible values that were on their website that they all espoused, but none of the executives and none of the senior people lived by those values. They lived by exactly the opposite. So the more important thing when you talk about culture and values is, do you live by those values? Can people look at you authentically and say, oh, Epic Squared, that Pat and Sanjay and other people talk about, they actually live by them. They obsess about their customers and they take care of their community and they're people of integrity. And yeah, they're extremely passionate and they execute really well, not perfectly. So when I got here, inspired by a lot of those same things that were important, every company's got to have that. I asked ourselves, if we're going to keep the radio values, I want us to rate as an executive team, how well we live by them. Okay. Like rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. And don't share that number, just keep it to yourself. And if we were to change one of those or two of those of those 5, RADIO is 5, which one would we want to focus on improving? And it was a very good exercise to figure out, which of those we wanted to change as a group. And I said, okay, that's how we can make sure this company's a great culture, that we took that time among ourselves to decide that we were excellent. I don't know, maybe we were excellent in obsession, but we were not as good in respecting each other. Okay, it's pointless having a culture which is obsessed about your customer, but you don't treat each other with respect. So, and I don't know if that was the exact particular number, the value that we need to improve on, but the exercise I was trying to run our team through was to ensure that every one of them wanted to live by those values as opposed to just having them on a website or as a statement that you preach about, but you don't live by. So that to me is the most important aspect. I mean, what made VMware great was we really cared about customers. We want to make them happy, and we cared about innovation. We really cared about innovation. We want to build the best product. And those things are the same things here. No different. When people here at VMware hear me talk a lot about employee engagement, about product innovation, about customer obsession. Those things made VMware great, and I think I think we're a long way from being as big and as iconic as VMware was, but we're younger in our stage of growth of the company. But when we get to 20 years old, we're about 12, 13 years. I hope we'll be as big a brand as VMware was when they were 20.
I think back on our experience with VMware, and I think we could feel some of those things that you're talking about as both as a client and as a partner. It's phenomenal. Is there something you can share with us a little bit about Cohesity and some of the success and kind of like the stories, but like a big success story where Cohesity maybe has delivered exactly what you hoped it would deliver for a customer?
Oh, there's so many. But if you take the financial services vertical, banking, some of our top banks are on a beeline to me, to our top leadership team. And when they tell us to jump, we say how high. Now, you might ask, well, that kind of feels like you're making yourself a slave to them. Why would you want to do that and put your team through so much intensity and, sleepless nights just to serve one of the top banks? I don't want to name who they are, but, we have almost all the top banks in the US as our customers. And it's a very simple principle that I have, which is if one of those top banks are happy with you and you built your product to serve their needs, you're probably going to nail every other bank because that top bank's requirements are very similar to the other banks. And every one of the smaller banks wants to be like one of those top banks. And you can name whoever that top bank is. We have all of them as our customers. So a customer wants to know, my gosh, the CEO is telling his team when we ask them to jump, he's telling them how high, and they're really going to give us the level. We don't do it perfectly all the time, but the mindset is when they tell us to jump how high. And now I'm not going to put my team through, I mean, if they're abusive to us or things of those kinds, I'm going to defend my company. But that mindset puts an enormous amount of, collective pressure on our company and our people to make sure this bank is really happy, financial services. And as a result, I hate to use the word, we're extremely strong in financial services. Like it's one of our strongest verticals. Almost a quarter of our revenue comes from that vertical. Okay. It's really strong. They happen to spend the most on IT. And I want every bank happy, and I want the biggest banks, and we have the biggest banks in almost every one of the top 10 countries. You know, the US, we have them. UK, South Africa, India, Singapore, Middle East, Australia, Japan. So I tell that lesson because, I never forget when I was at SAP, Henning Kagerman told me a story that when SAP first came to the United States, they parked a good part of their SAP team at Exxon. At the time, it was not even Exxon Mobil. It was the oil and gas company in Houston. And they did whatever Exxon asked them to do. Okay. And before you knew it, every oil and gas customer was an SAP customer. And that's a tremendous lesson that stuck with me, which is if you pick a right anchor customer in a particular vertical and you really make them happy, and you're not doing one-offs just for them, but you're building your product with them in co-innovation, you will crack that vertical. And when you crack that vertical, it'll be a bonanza, which really, made up for any of the attention you had to give that particular customer. Now, that mindset has to pervade your company. It has to pervade the engineers. It has to pervade the go-to-market people. It has to pervade support. But they know that when this customer calls that customer number one, and the CEO is going to care about the success of that customer. Now, I have 13,000 customers. I can't apply that same intensity of focus to every customer of the 13,000. So how do I do it? I have a pecking order of a customer, just like the way an airline has a pecking order of their passengers. When you walk in, United Airlines doesn't treat everybody the same way. You got to line up based on, are you priority 1, 2, 3, 4? That's based on your miles and the price you paid or whatever have you. So the customers who are our top customers by annual recurring revenue, they know that they are going to get pristine innovation, service from me. And the ones who haven't, they're also going to get supported, not at the same level as the thing. They're going to get support. We're not going to throw them out. But, they may be sitting in the back of the plane and they may not get the same level of treatment. But if they're a bank, they're going to benefit from everything I'm doing for this top bank because their requirements are probably easier. So that type of principle is when you and I tell people, listen, you know the number of startups that would kill to have this particular bank as a customer. So you have to institute these principles of customer obsession into your engineers, into your support people, into your sales teams, and find ways to make it very easy for them to understand why it's a priority and why Another one, like when a customer escalates to me, whether it's a small or big one, I try to respond back to them within 24 hours, even if I'm traveling. So it just means then that they know several of the customers have my cell phone. Yes, I have, north of 5,500 people in my company that help me. I'm not doing this alone. And, but that principle, those are some of the principles, guys, that I have tried to lay out to the company. And we're a long way from greatness. I think we're building an iconic company here, and we are now the market share leader in our space. So, but we have to work extra hard. But one of the most prized assets of this company is our customer base. It is the who's who, and if we take care of these customers, we can build a great company.
That is so insightful. I'm just been listening and thought that is priceless wisdom, and really, really appreciate that. I go back to, you said your parents were in the big into service, and then when I hear you say how you're serving the banks, I think that is a mindset of service
Yeah, it's a servant leadership. I mean,
that you
that's
just
how I view it. Servant leadership is we serve our customers, we serve our employees, and we make them successful. Your own needs will get taken off care of if you serve other people. I've always believe that. Don't if you live selfishly to take care of your own needs. And there's a time, I mean, everyone's selfish by nature. You have to be looking out for yourself too. But it's a much happier life when you make other people happy, right? I mean, your employees and your customers are the two big constituencies that the company I care about. And I can tell you, the testimony of my life is when you've made these constituents happy, your own happiness just gets taken care of anyway.
love that. Well, thank you. I was before this call doing some research on what else you're driving, some strategic initiatives, and it mentioned AI, and we couldn't have a podcast in this year without mentioning AI. So tell us about with so I asked ChatGPT, and it told us one of your strategic moves is AI driven product expansion. So first I need to ask if that's true. And can you tell us about that? Because I can't
Well,
trust everything ChatGPT says. So
that's good. I'm glad I use ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and Grok. I use all of them just
which
to.
one's your favorite? Let's
They're all good. They're all
okay.
good. They've all got the nuances. I can't tell you it. They all have nuances. I hope that all of them. I mean, some of them are charged for, but I hope they'll all be free because Gemini at Google. I think it's going to make all of us more productive, and we should not fear these things. We should embrace them big time. So first off, we are using AI internally in a lot of our processes, whether it's engineers, whether it's support. I'm making it a priority for every department to use AI in their processes, and we actually challenge each other to show how AI is transforming people's lives day in and day out. Today, we had a review of how it's being used inside support and engineering and things. So that's good. But as it relates to a customer, think of us like a company that collects a lot of data in a lake. That's what backup is, right? Immutable backup, it's a large amount of data. In our case, it's hundreds of exabytes, maybe 300 exabytes. If you could use that data as a mine, a gold mine of information for customers, right? If they could use that, it's not us, they could use that data to get insights because it's all of their historical indexed metadata and sorry, time series of all their data is in that lake. So we've been able to build with NVIDIA's help. NVIDIA put money into our company last year, and they were able to help us build a product called Gaia. That's the world's first retrieval augmented generation, term that's codenamed RAG, retrieval augmented generation, RAG tool for backup data. It's amazing. So here's a use case. You could have 200 million documents, PDF documents, sitting in our backup, which are all of your vendor contracts that you've had over the last 10 years. Okay. And you may want to search all of those documents. Think of that like, wow, 1 million Leo Tolstoy's. Okay. I mean, books for a pattern, like what discount percentage have you given your vendors? What's your length of your contract? And rather than, I mean, first off, a human being can't read 200 million documents. It's just forever. Even if you hired all the interns in the world, you couldn't do that. But summarizing a large document, if you said summarize Leo Tolstoy, that's what generative AI is. It's a great summarization tool of vast amount of unstructured data. So we were able to build this tool that can summarize large amounts of that documents. And the good news is it's not something out on the internet. It's the company's data. So you apply that AI tool like a flashlight onto this data, and you get the results, within a few seconds. It's extremely powerful. It's really starting to take off. NVIDIA was so excited about that they talked about Jensen himself in his keynote in 2024. He featured Cohesity and the company's keynote. And we also were able to get him doing it again in 2025 this year. So I'm very excited about Gaia. We're talking a lot about it. We're showing it a lot. It is basically a Copilot, an Anthropic, a Perplexity for our data. We're applying that type of tool to our data. Just think of you writing a question. If you're allowed to ask that question, you're writing that on top of the data that you have. Extremely powerful. And, I'm excited about it. And I think we'll see how this plays out. We're having some really, really good sized deals close. And we're excited about, the potential for this tool.
I just think that AI's, as we're watching it progress, it's going to change all of us and all of our businesses. So it's really cool to hear what you're doing there.
As a takeaway from this, or when you talk to business executives that are struggling with spending, or if you were to give advice to business executives that are struggling to understand their IT team and why they should spend money to lower their risk or to solve some of their problems, what have you seen? What advice would you give them, or what have you seen work to help executives understand the need to be tech forward, to be thinking about the technology that's being built and how it can help them?
I think, I'd encourage doesn't have to be an executive, but every individual. I encourage my kids with this. Be intellectually curious, have a growth mindset. That book by Carol Dweck from Stanford about the growth mindset. They're different. I mean, it was written to parents. I mean, my wife actually introduced me to that book first in the context of our kids and building the growth mindset for our kids. What's the premise of that book? The research showed that when a kid hits his or her first failure in life, okay, or some kind of, I didn't do well in the class, or I came 10th in the race, or I got a C in this class grade. You can have a fixed mindset, which is I'm a failure, I'm never going to succeed, and this person's always better than me. Or, and, and often some of those people are like, give up, or they kind of are know-it-alls, right? Instead, a learn-it-all mindset is not fixed. They are got a growth mindset to say, no, I can improve. Tell me what I could do. I'm gonna really, and even if I don't come first in this race, or I become the first in the class or an A plus, I'm gonna go from 10th in the running race, to I'm gonna get a sixth or fifth, and I can do better than this. And that mindset, even if you don't, you're constantly asking what you can learn. The greatest athletes, like what always struck me with Michael Jordan was the stories where he would win a championship and the next day he'd be in the gym because he was worried that somebody else was going to be working out and be better than him next year. So I think even the greatest athletes who are good at things, they found ways to improve. And we have to build the muscle in our teams and ourselves to constantly say, if someone gives you feedback, it's a gift. And I'm not going to be defensive. The natural human reaction is to be defensive. I'm going to work on it, and the next time I'm going to get better with this feedback. And if it's not feedback that's appropriate and I disagree with, I'm still going to listen to it, dwell on it, and then maybe, okay, I didn't need that. But I don't need to react defensively when someone gives me feedback. So I think, and it gets harder to receive feedback the more senior you get. I mean, it's just because you build a little bit of a kind of a protective zone around you. People are intimidated giving you feedback. So one of the things that we try to practice here, and what I practiced at VMware and at SAP, is, we are absolutely welcoming of feedback. I mean, I tell people it's a gift, and we really emphasize everyone having a growth mindset. Now, it doesn't mean that everything I do with a person on my team is critiquing them. I always think like for every 7 or 8 celebratory messages, you need 2 or 3 critiques. But it should be in that ratio. Celebration to critiques should be like 7 to 3 or 8 to 2, as opposed to, if the only thing I can think about with someone is what they can do better. However, the only thing I could tell them are all these cheerleading comments like, oh, you're great, you're great, you're great, you're great. And I have nothing that I can ever share with them that they can improve. They're not going to be a better athlete. That's like a coach who's cheerleading all the time, but is so intimidated to want to give critique to people. So you have to find the right way to celebrate and critique. And as a leader, you have to find the space in your uh, to accept that, to create that culture in your executive staff, among your top leaders, among all the managers, and then of course the rank and file of the company. And when you do that with authenticism, I mean, being authentic about it. I mean, if you're just doing it artificially, people will kind of smell through it. But when you're authentic about your praise for someone, and it's often done at the time, like someone gave a great speech or you did something good, right after they're done. Hey, listen, I just want to tell you it was fantastic. Great. Okay. Okay. If they even screwed up before you get to the criticism, you talk about one or two things they did well, but then you give them real-time feedback, both positive or constructive at the time, real time. So I encourage people to do those types of things. And it's not, you're not waiting for your end of year reviews. You've been getting critics. So a good example, Michael's worked with me for many years. One of the things that, I get on, not just podcasts like this, but I get on CNBC with Jim Cramer or, so on and so forth. I'd ask him like, hey, want you and the PR team give me some feedback on what we just did as a public broadcast, like while it's still fresh in your head by tomorrow morning. And I would read every one of their feedbacks because it was important to me to understand what went well. I'd watch my interview if it was on broadcast TV a couple of different times just to understand what I could have done better. But if I was defensive about accepting feedback, at some point in time, my team will stop giving me feedback because they're intimidated, right? So I think those are some of the things that I'd encourage leaders. As you get higher, it's a lot easier to build an insular culture where people are uncomfortable giving you feedback. You have to allow the space for people to give you the positives. And if you can only receive positives, then you're a narcissist. I mean, you're kind of like you're going to build an insular attitude where the only people who could be around you. At the same time, some people you got to find a way to give them critique in a way they can accept it. But if it's done with the spirit of a coach and done with the spirit of wanting them to be better, it can be done with love and kindness, and people know that you got your back. I mean, I want to receive critique from people who I know have got my back and are willing to make me a better person and are invested with me over many, many years to make me a better person, as opposed to just some drive-by, fly-by criticism that people give. Those types of feedbacks are never helpful. But if you're invested in people's career, and I'm invested in all of my people's career, whether they're manager, director, VP, on staff, whatever have you, I want them to be the best they possibly can. And part of that is kind of, sometimes feedback that goes right between the eyes that's going to feel a little uncomfortable, but makes them better. So I need to be able to give that and I need to be able to receive it in a way where it's good. So those are things that we try to practice on from this notion of a growth mindset. Hopefully that's helpful to your audience, if it is. And the leaders I respect in the industry, like Satya Nadella, they are all of this ilk of leadership where, a growth mindset's what has made them great. And I respect their wisdom. Andy Jassy is another one. So I think it's a different type of leader. The command and control leader of the General Patton era from, whatever, 70, 80, 100 years ago, that's done. I mean, if you're command and control, I mean, you can get away with that if you're a Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk. But even a Jensen Huang, if you like, I know him very well as a mentor and friend of mine, he is a very different, a very humble, hungry servant leader, kind of a, growth mindset, very much like Satya Nadella. And those people are very inspiring, and I hope the world can be filled with, whether you're a CEO, with more people who have that growth mindset. Probably a good way to close out our.
Yeah, I love that. I quote to
Oh, good.
everyone that starts at Valcom, I'd rather work with a learn it all than a know it all. I think that comes from
Yeah,
Satya, and
yeah,
that principle is
yeah,
huge. Well,
yeah.
we appreciate you not just jumping on this podcast, which we deeply appreciate, but also building a company that we get to be partners with, that we get to share that solution with our customers. You're important to us. We don't exist without your great technology, without your leadership, without working with your entire team, which have been amazing to work with. So thank you for having a great team, building a great culture, and thank you so much for the
Yeah, thank
partnership.
you, Mike
So
and
Yeah.
Josh, the Linton brothers. I'm
Yeah.
excited for you
Thanks for the
guys.
great insight. I think personally, I've got some things my kids are going to appreciate some of the things I learned today. That's for sure.
We all learn together. I wish you well in your podcast, in your business, in your families, and we'll talk again soon.